They missed it. Every single one of them, the most important moment of my life. And not one empty chair had my last name on it. I remember standing there in full dress uniform, the weight of the medal already pressing into my chest before it even touched the fabric. Cameras flashing, hands clapping. My commanding officer calling my name like it meant something bigger than me. And all I could see past the polished rows of strangers, past the flags, past the ceremony, was a single row of seats that stayed empty. My seat wasn't empty. I was there. But theirs told the truth I had been avoiding for years. I had told them it mattered. Not everything about the mission, of course. That part was classified. But I had called my father 3 weeks earlier, standing outside a secure briefing room with the desert wind still clinging to my uniform. I remember pressing the phone tight to my ear, listening to it ring longer than it should have. When he picked up, his voice sounded distracted, like I had interrupted something more important. "Hey, Dad, I got something coming up. A recognition ceremony, stateside. They said family can attend." There was a pause. Not the kind filled with emotion, the kind filled with calculation. "What kind of ceremony?" "I can't go into details, but it's a big deal. For my unit. For me." Another pause, then a sigh, soft but deliberate. "You chose this life, Hannah. You know we don't really understand all that military stuff." I swallowed, forcing my voice to stay steady. "You don't have to understand it, just be there." He didn't say yes, he didn't say no, he said we'll see. That phrase had followed me my entire life like a shadow. I called my mother next. She picked up faster, her voice warmer but thinner somehow, like it had been worn down over the years. "Oh, honey, that sounds important." "It is," I said. "Can you come?" She hesitated. I could hear my father's voice faintly in the background, asking something about dinner. "I'll talk to your dad," she said softly. That meant no. My younger brother didn't even pretend. When I texted him, he replied an hour later with "got work, maybe next time." There had never been a next time. Still, I sent the details: date, time, location, dress code. I even added a note: "This one matters to me." I don't know why I thought that would change anything. The day of the ceremony arrived colder than I expected. Not in temperature, the base was warm, the sky clear, but in the way the air felt when I stepped outside my quarters that morning. Like something had already decided how the day would end, and I was just walking toward it. My uniform was pressed to regulation perfection. Every ribbon aligned, every crease sharp. I checked it twice then, a third time, not because it needed it, but because it gave me something to control, something predictable. My roommate Carter leaned against the doorway watching me adjust my collar. "You nervous?" she asked. I shook my head. "No." She smirked. "That's a lie." I allowed myself a small breath. Not about the ceremony. She studied me for a second longer than I liked. "They coming?" I didn't answer right away. That was answer enough. Carter nodded slowly. "Then today's not about them." I wanted to believe that. The auditorium was already filling when we arrived. Rows of chairs arranged with military precision. Families sitting close together, some dressed up like it was a graduation, others holding small flags or cameras. There was a low hum of pride in the room, the kind you could feel without hearing. I scanned the crowd once, then again. Nothing. No familiar faces, no last-minute arrivals, no one waving from the back like they almost missed it but made it anyway. Just strangers. I told myself it was fine, that I had expected this, that I had prepared for it. But preparation and reality are two very different things. The ceremony began with formalities. Speeches about service sacrifice duty. Words I had heard before, but today they landed differently. Today they felt heavier. Not because of what they meant, but because of who wasn't there to hear them. One by one names were called. Soldiers stepped forward. Families clapped louder for their own. Cameras flashed brighter when someone's son or daughter stood at attention. I watched a young private hug his mother after receiving his recognition. She cried openly, pressing her face into his shoulder like she had been holding that moment in for years. I looked away. When they called my name, the room shifted slightly. I could feel it. Not because I was special, but because the citation that followed carried weight. Captain Hannah Mercer, my commanding officer, began, his voice steady and authoritative. For exceptional leadership under high-risk operational conditions. The words continued, detailing pieces of a mission I knew by heart, but could never fully speak about. decisions made in seconds, risks calculated in silence, lives balanced on choices no one should have to make alone. I stepped forward. My boots echoed louder than I expected against the polished floor. I kept my eyes straight ahead. Not on the seats. Not on the empty row. But I felt it anyway. The absence. The quiet where their voices should have been. The space where my father's approval never lived. The metal was pinned to my uniform with practiced precision. My commanding officer met my eyes for a brief second, just long enough to say what words couldn't. "You did your job. You did it well." The room applauded. I nodded, saluted, turned. Professional, controlled, exactly as I had been trained. But as I walked back to my seat, the sound of applause shifted in my ears. It became distant, hollow, like it belonged to someone else's life. I sat down, hands resting on my knees, back straight, face neutral. No one next to me leaned in to whisper, "We're proud of you." No one reached for my hand. No one said my name. The ceremony ended 20 minutes later. Families rushed forward, surrounding their loved ones with hugs, laughter, pictures. The room filled with warmth I could see but not feel. Carter found me near the exit. "You good?" she asked. I nodded. "Yeah." Another lie. She didn't push. She just stood there for a moment, then gave my shoulder a light squeeze before stepping away to find her own people. I walked out alone. The sun hit my face as I stepped outside, brighter than it had any right to be. For a second, I just stood there, letting the noise of the auditorium fade behind me. In my pocket, my phone buzzed. I pulled it out. For a brief, stupid moment, something inside me hoped. Maybe they came late. Maybe they were outside. Maybe it was a notification. A bank alert. I stared at the screen for a second longer than necessary, then locked it and slipped it back into my pocket. Of course. I took a slow breath, then another. And that's when it settled. Not anger. Not even sadness. Just clarity. I had spent years trying to earn something that was never going to be given. And standing there in uniform, decorated, recognized, I realized something that should have been obvious all along. I was enough without them. But that didn't mean it didn't hurt. People like my father believe they understand risk. They talk about it in terms of money investments, the kind of losses you can measure on paper and recover with time. But real risk, the kind that doesn't wait, the kind that doesn't negotiate, feels different. It has a sound, a pressure, a moment where everything narrows down to a single decision and you don't get a second chance to make it right. The mission had started as routine, at least on paper. A downed U.S. pilot in a contested region of the Middle East. Coordinates uncertain. Hostile presence confirmed. Recovery window limited. The kind of situation that gets briefed in calm voices around a table like it's just another line item. I was the one assigned to lead the extraction team. Not because I was the most senior. Not because I asked for it, but because I had a reputation one I never tried to build for making decisions under pressure without freezing. Mercer, my commanding officer, had said during the briefing, tapping the map with a pen, "You're on point. We don't have the luxury of waiting for perfect intel. You'll adapt as you go." Adapt. That word carries more weight than people think. We deployed under cover of darkness. The rotors cut through the night air with a steady, controlled rhythm, but inside the aircraft everything felt tighter, focused. No wasted movement. No unnecessary words. Across from me, Sergeant Lewis checked his gear for the third time. "You ever notice," he muttered, not looking up, "how they always say, high probability, like it's supposed to make you feel better?" I allowed myself the smallest hint of a smile, only when it's not your name on the line. He glanced up, then meeting my eyes. "Tonight it is." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. When we touched down, the world shifted from controlled to chaotic in a matter of seconds. Sand kicked up around us, reducing visibility. Comms crackled with fragmented updates. The pilot's last known position was close, but not precise. "Team Alpha move," I ordered, my voice steady through the headset. We advanced in formation, each step calculated, each movement deliberate. The kind of coordination that only comes from training together long enough to trust each other without question. We found the pilot faster than expected. That should have been a good sign. It wasn't. He was conscious barely, injured but alive. Propped against what remained of his aircraft, breathing shallow, his flight suit torn at the shoulder. "Captain Mercer," he rasped when he saw me approach. I nodded. "You're coming home." Those words carry a promise, one I don't make lightly. We secured him, stabilized what we could in the field, and signaled for extraction. The plan was simple: get in, get out, minimal engagement. But plans don't survive contact. The first shot came from our flank, sharp, unmistakable. "Contact left," Lewis shouted. Everything accelerated. Return fire, movement, adjustments. The kind of chaos that looks random from the outside but follows a pattern if you've been in it long enough. "Bird inbound in 5" came over comms. 5 minutes? In that environment, 5 minutes is a lifetime. We shifted positions using what little cover we had. The pilot's condition was deteriorating. Every second mattered. Then came the moment. "Mercer, we need to pull back," Lewis said, his voice tight but controlled. "They're closing in." He wasn't wrong. The safe call, the correct call by protocol, was to withdraw, mark the position, return with heavier support. But the pilot wouldn't make it that long. I looked at him, really looked. Blood loss, shock, fading consciousness. If we left, we were leaving him to die. "Negative," I said. Lewis's head snapped toward me. "Ma'am." "We move now," I cut in. "We're not leaving him." There are decisions that define you, not in the moment but in the consequences that follow. This was one of them. We shifted our formation, tightened our perimeter, and moved toward the extraction point ahead of schedule. It wasn't clean. It wasn't controlled. It was calculated risk, pushing the edge of what we could manage without breaking. The helicopter came in hot. Dust, noise, pressure. "Go, go, go," I ordered. Lewis and another soldier loaded the pilot first. I stayed on the ground a second longer than I should have, covering their movement. That's when I heard it, a sharp intake of breath behind me. Private Ellis. He had taken a hit. Not fatal, but bad enough to slow him down. "Move," I shouted, grabbing his vest and pulling him toward the aircraft. Rounds hit the ground around us, kicking up dirt and stone. We made it. Barely. The doors slammed shut as the helicopter lifted the ground, dropping away beneath us in a blur of motion and noise. Inside, everything shifted again. From chaos to aftermath. Medics moved quickly, stabilizing both the pilot and Ellis. Lewis sat across from me, breathing heavier than he'd admit. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Then he looked at me, shaking his head slightly. "That wasn't by the book." "No," I said. A pause. "But it worked." I didn't answer. Because working comes with a cost. Back at base, the reports were filed, the decisions reviewed, the outcomes analyzed. I was called in for debrief. "You deviated from protocol," my commanding officer said, his tone neutral. "Yes, sir." "You understand the risk that posed to your team?" "I do." He studied me for a long moment. "And you'd make the same call again?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes, sir." Another pause. Then a slow nod. "That's what I thought." The pilot survived. Ellis recovered. The mission was classified as a success. And somewhere along the line, someone decided it was worth recognizing. Not the decision itself, not the moment, but the outcome. That's how it works. You don't get recognized for what you risk. You get recognized for what you bring back. Back home, none of that mattered. When I tried to explain carefully, vaguely, within the limits of what I was allowed to say, my father's response was the same as always. "You're making it sound more dramatic than it is." I remember standing in my kitchen, phone pressed to my ear, staring at nothing. "I'm not," I said quietly. He sighed. "Hannah, people have dangerous jobs everywhere. You're not the only one." Number. But I was the one who had been there. The one who had to decide. The one who had to live with it. "I'm not asking you to understand everything I said, just some of it." There was a pause. "Then we'll talk about it another time." We never did. And that's the thing about moments like that mission. They don't leave you. Not completely. They stay with you in small ways. In the way you assess a room. In the way you notice exits. In the way silence feels heavier than it used to. My family never saw that version of me. They never asked. And eventually, I stopped offering. The morning it happened didn't feel like anything special. No warning, no build-up, no dramatic shift in the air. Just another early wake-up on base, the kind where your body moves before your mind fully catches up. I swung my legs off the bed, the floor cool under my feet, and reached automatically for my phone. Notifications, emails, routine. And then I saw it. A message from Carter. Check the news, now. No emojis, no explanation. Just that. I frowned slightly, still half in that quiet space between sleep and awareness, and tapped open the browser. The homepage loaded slowly, the connection lagging just enough to stretch the moment. Then it appeared. At the top. Front and center. A photograph I recognized immediately but had never seen from that angle before. Me. Standing beside the helicopter uniform dusted with sand helmet tucked under my arm, eyes focused somewhere beyond the frame. It wasn't a posed image. It wasn't polished. It was real, raw. And beneath it the headline, U.S. officer leads high-risk mission to rescue downed pilot. Published by the New York Times. For a few seconds I just stared. Not because I didn't understand what I was seeing, but because I did. Too well. They had released part of the mission. Not everything, not the full context, but enough to tell a story, enough to turn a series of decisions made in the dark into something visible, something public. I scrolled slowly. Details I recognized stripped down and translated into something civilians could digest. Words like bravery, leadership, decisive action under fire. Words that sounded distant, like they belonged to someone else. My name appeared 3 times in the article. Each time it felt less familiar. I didn't feel proud. Not the way I thought I would. Instead, there was this strange, quiet detachment. Like watching your own life from a distance, knowing the version people were seeing wasn't the one you lived through. My phone buzzed again. Then again. Messages started coming in from people I hadn't heard from in months. Former classmates, old neighbors, even a distant cousin I barely remembered. Just saw you in the news. So proud of you. This is incredible. I responded where I could. Short replies, polite acknowledgements. Thank you. Appreciate it. Means a lot. It didn't. Not in the way it should have. Because the only messages I was waiting for weren't there. I kept checking anyway. Every few minutes, refreshing the screen like it might change if I just gave it enough time. Nothing. No missed calls. No texts. No acknowledgement. By midday, the story had spread. Local outlets picked it up. Military channels shared it internally. Even the base commander stopped me in the hallway. Mercer, he said, offering a firm nod. Good work. Thank you, sir. You represented us well. I held his gaze steady, professional. I did my job. He studied me for a second like he was trying to read something beneath the surface. Then he gave a small approving nod and moved on. Carter found me later in the break room leaning against the counter with a cup of coffee I hadn't touched. You're trending, she said, holding up her phone. I wish people wouldn't say that like it's a good thing. She raised an eyebrow. Most people would kill for this. Most people don't know what it actually cost. She didn't argue. Instead, she leaned beside me, her voice softer now. They call yet. I didn't look at her, no. A pause. They will. I didn't answer. Because deep down I already knew how this worked. Silence wasn't an oversight. It was a pattern. By late afternoon, the noise started to settle. Messages slowed. The initial wave of attention began to fade into something quieter. More manageable. I went back to my quarters, closing the door behind me with a soft click that felt louder than it should have. The room was still. Familiar. Safe. I set my phone on the table and walked to the window, staring out at the base as the sun dipped lower in the sky. Long shadows stretched across the ground, softening the edges of everything. For a moment I let myself imagine something different. What it would have felt like if my father had called that morning. If his voice had sounded proud. If my mother had cried just a little hearing my name on the news. If my brother had sent something more than a half-hearted message. Just once. Just enough to make it real. The phone buzzed again. I turned slowly, not rushing this time, not letting myself hope too quickly. I picked it up. A new message. From Dad. I stared at his name on the screen longer than I should have. Then I opened it. Family dinner 7 p.m., don't be late. That was it. No mention of the article. No acknowledgement of what had happened. No, I saw you. No, I'm proud of you. Just an instruction. A time. A command wrapped in something that pretended to be normal. I read it again. and again, waiting for something hidden between the lines. There was nothing. A slow, familiar feeling settled in my chest, not sharp like anger, not heavy like sadness. Just clarity. They hadn't missed the story. They hadn't overlooked it. They had seen it. And this was their response. Control. Routine. An attempt to pull everything back into the version of reality where nothing had changed. Where I was still the daughter who showed up when told. Where my life, no matter how far it stretched beyond them, still bent back toward their expectations. I set the phone down carefully like it might break if I moved too quickly. Then I sat. Quiet. Still. Letting the moment settle. For years I had told myself that if I just did enough, achieved enough, proved enough, something would shift. They would see me differently. They would meet me where I stood. But sitting there in that quiet room with my name still echoing somewhere out in the world, I realized something I hadn't fully allowed myself to accept. This wasn't about what I did. It never had been. The phone buzzed again. Another message from Carter. You going? I looked at the screen. Then at the message from my father. 7 p.m. Don't be late. I leaned back slightly, exhaling slowly, my eyes drifting back toward the window. The light had changed. Softer now. Darker. Like the day was closing in on itself. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the pull to answer right away. I didn't feel the need to explain. Or justify. Or adjust. I just sat there holding the silence. And somewhere in that silence, something shifted. Not loud. Not dramatic. But permanent. I arrived at 7:02. Not because I was running late. Because I chose not to rush. The house looked exactly the same as it always had. Same white siding. Same neatly trimmed lawn my father insisted on maintaining himself like control over grass could somehow translate into control over everything else. The porch light was on. It always was. A signal maybe that this place was still supposed to feel like home. I stepped inside without knocking. The smell hit me first, roasted chicken garlic, something warm and familiar. It should have felt comforting. It didn't. Voices drifted in from the dining room. Normal voices. Casual. Like nothing had happened. Like I hadn't stood on the front page of a national newspaper that morning. Like they hadn't missed the one moment I had asked them clearly directly not to miss. My father was already seated at the head of the table when I walked in. He glanced up briefly, checking the time on the wall clock behind me before his eyes settled on my face. You're late. 2 minutes. I pulled out a chair without responding and sat down. My mother offered a small smile from across the table, her hand still resting near the serving dish. Hi, honey. Hi, Mom. My brother barely looked up from his phone. Hey. That was it. No one said anything about the article. No one mentioned the ceremony. No one acknowledged anything beyond the fact that I had entered the room. My father picked up his fork, cutting into his food with precise, controlled movements. So he said, as if we were continuing a conversation from earlier that day, You've been busy. I watched him for a second before answering. I have. He nodded once. That's good. Silence settled over the table, thick but familiar. The kind of silence that had defined most of my childhood, where things that mattered weren't said, and things that didn't took their place. My brother cleared his throat. I've got a presentation next week, he said, glancing up briefly. Big client. Could be a promotion if it goes well. My father's attention shifted immediately. That's what I like to hear. You've been putting in the work. Yeah, he said, a small smile forming, finally paying off. My mother chimed in softly. We're very proud of you. I looked down at my plate. Of course they were. I let the moment pass without comment. The conversation continued around me, moving easily from one topic to another, work finances, plans for the weekend. I listened, responding when necessary, keeping my tone, even my expressions, controlled. From the outside, it probably looked normal. A family dinner. Nothing more. Nothing less. And maybe that was the point. Halfway through the meal, my father set his fork down and leaned back slightly, his gaze shifting back to me. There is something we need to discuss, he said. I met his eyes. Okay. He folded his hands together on the table. I spoke with someone today. A contact. He mentioned that with your Recent visibility, there might be opportunities. I didn't react. What kind of opportunities, I asked. Connections, he said. Introductions. People who could benefit from knowing someone in your position. There it was. Not pride. Not curiosity. Utility. I'm not a networking tool, I said calmly. His expression didn't change. That's not what I'm suggesting. I'm saying this could be beneficial for all of us. For all of us, I repeated. My brother leaned in slightly. It's not a bad idea, Hannah. I mean, if you've got access to certain circles. I cut in, and even if I did, that's not how this works. My father's jaw tightened just slightly. You're being defensive. I'm being clear. He exhaled slowly like he was trying to maintain patience. Family comes first. I felt something shift inside me then. Not a surge. Not an explosion. Just a quiet, precise alignment of thoughts that had been building for years. Funny, I said, my voice steady. You remembered that now. The room stilled. My mother's hands paused mid-motion. My brother looked up fully for the first time. My father's eyes narrowed slightly. What's that supposed to mean? I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. It means I said you didn't say that when I asked you to come to the ceremony. No one spoke. I continued. I called you. I told you it mattered. I asked you to be there. My father shifted in his chair. We've been over this. You know we don't. You didn't even try, I said, still calm. You didn't ask questions. You didn't show up. You didn't call afterward. My mother's voice came softly, almost pleading. Honey, we didn't realize it was. I told you it was important, I said, turning to her briefly. That should have been enough. Silence. Thicker now. Heavier. My father leaned forward, his tone sharpening. We're here now. I held his gaze. Yes, I said, you are. Another pause. Then I added quietly, but you weren't there. The words settled over the table like something tangible. My brother shifted uncomfortably. Look, maybe this doesn't need to be a whole thing. It's already a whole thing, I said, not looking at him. I turned back to my father. You asked me to be here tonight. I came. Not because you told me to, but because I needed to understand something. His expression hardened. And what's that? Whether anything had changed. Another silence. Longer this time. Then he said, You're overreacting. I almost smiled. Not because it was funny. Because it was predictable. I stood in a room full of people who didn't know me. I said, my voice still controlled, still even. And they recognized what I did. They respected it. They showed up. I let that sit for a second before continuing. You didn't miss a dinner, I said. You missed me. That was the moment. The one where everything shifted. The room went completely still. No clinking of silverware. No movement. Just the weight of what had been said hanging in the air. My mother looked down at her hands. My brother leaned back, exhaling slowly. And my father, for the first time in a long time, didn't have an immediate response. I pushed my chair back slightly and stood. I'm not here to argue, I said. And I'm not here to fix this tonight. My father finally spoke, his voice lower now. Then why are you here? I looked at him. Really looked at him. Not as a daughter trying to earn approval, but as someone seeing him clearly for the first time. I'm here, I said, to decide what I'm not willing to carry anymore. And with that, I stepped away from the table. No slammed doors. No raised voices. Just a quiet exit that said more than anything I could have added. The air outside felt different. Not lighter, not easier. Just clearer. I stood on the front steps for a moment, letting the door close quietly behind me. No one followed. No one called my name. Inside the house went on plates, voices the familiar rhythm of a family that knew how to continue, without ever truly confronting anything. For years I would have stayed. Sat back down, smoothed things over, adjusted my words, my tone, my expectations just enough to keep the peace. Just enough to stay connected to something that never quite connected back. But something had changed. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. Just enough. I walked to my car, the gravel crunching softly under my boots. The night air carried a faint chill, the kind that settles into your skin without asking permission. I didn't rush. There was nowhere I needed to be except away. When I got inside, I didn't start the engine right away. I just sat there, hands resting loosely on the steering wheel, eyes unfocused, replaying the evening, not the words, but the spaces between them, the pauses, the way my father had leaned forward when he wanted something, the way my mother had lowered her gaze when things became uncomfortable, the way my brother had tried to steer the conversation back to something easier. Patterns. Clearer now than they had ever been. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. I glanced down. A message from my mother. "You didn't have to leave like that." I read it once, then again. And for the first time, I didn't feel the urge to respond immediately. I didn't feel the need to explain why I left or soften the impact of it. Because I hadn't left in anger. I had left in clarity. I set the phone back down. A minute later, it buzzed again. This time, my father. "We're not finished talking." I let out a quiet breath, something close to a laugh, but without the humor. We had never really started talking. Not in the way that mattered. I picked up the phone, stared at the message, and for a moment I considered all the ways I could respond. The versions of myself I had been before, each one ready to engage, to argue, to defend. Instead, I typed, "I am." I hit send before I could second-guess it. The reply didn't come right away, and that was fine. I started the engine. The drive back to base was quiet. No music, no distractions, just the steady hum of the road and the rhythm of my thoughts settling into something more structured, more defined. By the time I reached the gate, I felt steady. Not resolved, but aligned. Carter was still up when I got back. Her door was open, a soft light spilling into the hallway. She looked up as I passed, reading my expression before I said anything. "You went," she said. "I did." She leaned back in her chair, arms crossed loosely, and I paused in the doorway, considering how to answer. "They didn't ask about the article," I said. Her brow lifted slightly, not even once. I shook my head. A beat. And I think that told me everything I needed to know. Carter studied me for a second longer, then nodded slowly. "So what now?" That question used to feel overwhelming. Tonight it didn't. Now I said I stop expecting them to be something they're not. She tilted her head. "That sounds simple." "It's not," I said, "but it's necessary." She nodded again, more firmly this time. "Yeah, it is." I gave her a small, genuine smile, one that didn't feel forced or performative, and continued down the hall to my room. Inside, everything was exactly where I had left it. Uniform jacket draped over the chair, boots lined up near the door, the quiet order of a life built on discipline and routine. I took off my jacket, slowly hanging it up with care. The metal caught the light for a brief second before settling into stillness against the fabric. I stepped back and looked at it. Not as something to prove. Not as something to show. Just as something that was mine. Earned. Understood. Carried. My phone buzzed again. I glanced at it from across the room. Another message from my mother. "We're proud of you, we just don't always know how to say it." I stood there for a moment, letting the words settle. They weren't nothing. But they weren't everything either. For years I would have taken that message and built something bigger around it, filled in the gaps, translated the silence into something softer, something easier to accept. Tonight I didn't. I walked over, picked up the phone and typed, "I understand." And that was it. No more. No less. Because understanding didn't mean accepting the same pattern again. It meant seeing it clearly and choosing differently. Over the next few days, things shifted in small, subtle ways. My father didn't call. My brother sent a short message about his presentation going well. My mother checked in once, asking if I was eating enough, if I was sleeping. Normal things. Surface things. And for the first time, I met them at that level. I didn't push deeper. I didn't offer more than what was given. Not out of punishment, but out of balance. At work, life continued as it always did. Briefings, training, quiet conversations in hallways that carried more weight than they seemed to. The article faded from headlines, replaced by the next story, the next name. That was expected. Recognition is temporary. What stays is what you build after it. A week later, I was back in the field for a training exercise. Early morning, cold air, the kind that sharpens your focus. We moved through the drill with precision, each step practiced, each decision measured. At one point, we paused near the edge of a clearing, waiting for the next instruction. Lewis stepped up beside me, adjusting his gear. "You ever think about going back?" he asked casually. "Back where?" He shrugged. "Home, for real." I considered that for a second. Then I said I don't think I ever really left, not in the way that matters. He glanced at me. "That sounds complicated." "It's not," I said, "it's just different now." He nodded slowly, accepting that without needing more explanation. A few minutes later, the exercise resumed. Movement, focus, purpose. The things that had always made sense to me. That night back in my room, I sat by the window again. The same view, the same quiet. But it didn't feel the same. Not because anything around me had changed, but because I thought about the years I had spent trying to earn a place at a table that never quite made room for me. The adjustments, the compromises, the quiet ways I had minimized myself just to stay connected. And I realized something simple. I wasn't asking for too much. I was asking the wrong people. I leaned back, slightly exhaling slowly, the tension in my shoulders easing in a way I hadn't noticed before. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting. Not for a call. Not for approval. Not for something to shift outside of me. I had already done that work. And it was enough. I spent years trying to earn a seat at their table. Turns out, I already had a place where I was seen. If you've ever felt overlooked by the people who were supposed to know you best, I'd really like to hear your story. Leave a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. And if this story stayed with you, consider subscribing. There are more like this, and we're just getting started. The call came while I was watching 3 drones circle a convoy under a desert sky the color of burned copper. One of my operators whispered coordinates. Another adjusted the thermal feed. Everything was quiet, controlled, predictable, until my satellite phone vibrated against the metal table. I almost ignored it. Then I saw the hospital code. I stepped outside the command tent, the wind cutting across the sand, and answered. A nurse's voice trembled. "Major Carter, your daughter is in critical condition." My grip tightened. Then she said the words that split the night open. "Your ex-husband's new wife hurt her, and the detective won't act. Her brother is the police chief." For a moment, the desert disappeared. The screens, the radios, the men waiting for my orders, all of it faded behind a single image. Lily's small hand wrapped around my finger the day I deployed last spring. She had tried to be brave, her chin lifted the way she'd seen me do in uniform, but her eyes betrayed her. "Come back fast, Mom," she had whispered. I promised I would. I always kept my promises. "Major," the nurse said softly, as if afraid I'd dropped the call. "I'm here." My voice sounded steady, almost detached. Years of command had trained me to keep emotion behind glass. "Tell me exactly what happened." She was brought in 30 minutes ago. Multiple bruises, possible internal bleeding. She kept repeating that someone pushed her. The nurse hesitated. "She said your husband's wife did it." The wind rose, lifting sand against my boots. Inside the tent, I could hear one of my sergeants calling for confirmation on a grid coordinate. The mission was still running. A convoy suspected of moving weapons across the border. Intelligence suggested we had one chance to confirm before they disappeared. I should have gone back inside, finished the operation, handed off responsibility the proper way. That's what protocol demanded. But Lily was 8 years old. "Is she conscious?" I asked. "She's drifting in and out. We've sedated her for imaging." "Major, you should come." I closed my eyes for a second, letting the desert air burn my lungs. "Where is her father?" "He's here, and his wife." The nurse lowered her voice. "The police have already ruled it an accident." Of course they had. "And the detective?" "He said there's no evidence of foul play. He wouldn't even take a statement from the neighbor who heard yelling." Another pause. "Major, the police chief arrived 10 minutes ago. He's her brother." The quiet inside me hardened. I had seen this pattern before in places far less polite than suburban America. Power protecting itself, truth buried under authority. Only this time it wasn't a stranger caught in the system. It was my daughter. "I'm coming," I said. When I stepped back into the command tent, the room snapped into focus. Screens glowed, maps flickered. My executive officer looked up immediately. "Ma'am." I walked to the table and studied the drone feed. The convoy moved slowly along a dirt road, heat signatures shifting inside the vehicles. Everything depended on the next 10 minutes. My decision would affect not just the mission, but the safety of units waiting downrange. I knew that. I also knew something else: leadership sometimes meant trusting the team you built. "Captain Ruiz," I said quietly. "Yes, ma'am." "You have the mission." He blinked, surprised. "Ma'am." "My daughter's been hospitalized. I'm leaving." I tapped the screen. "Continue surveillance. Confirm payload before escalation. If you lose visual, abort. No risks." Ruiz nodded, his expression sharpening with responsibility. "Understood." I turned away before the weight of the decision could settle. Outside, the desert night felt colder. I walked toward the operations trailer, already dialing command for emergency transport. Each step felt measured, deliberate, the way I moved before stepping into uncertain territory. While I waited for the line to connect, memories surfaced uninvited. Lily sitting at the kitchen table doing homework while I packed for deployment. Her careful handwriting, the way she stuck her tongue out when concentrating. Daniel leaning in the doorway, arms crossed, watching me with that familiar mixture of admiration and resentment. He used to say he admired my discipline. Later he called it distance. Somewhere along the way, admiration turned into something else, something brittle. The line clicked. Operations command. "This is Major Carter. I need immediate transport stateside. Family emergency." There was a pause. "Understood, Major. We'll arrange the fastest available aircraft." I ended the call and stared out at the horizon. The desert stretched, endlessly silent and indifferent. Somewhere across an ocean, my daughter lay in a hospital bed, surrounded by people who might already be deciding her story for her. I imagined Rachel Daniels' new wife with her practiced smile, her soft voice that always seemed just a little too careful. The first time I met her, she had complimented Lily's dress, then suggested boarding school 5 minutes later. I remembered the unease I felt, the instinct I couldn't fully articulate. Now that instinct roared inside me. My phone vibrated again, the same nurse. "Major, she asked for you." The words pierced deeper than anything else. What did she say? She whispered, "Don't let her come back." Then she lost consciousness. I pressed my hand against the metal railing beside me. The cold steadied me. "Listen carefully," I said. "Document everything, every bruise, every statement. Don't let them move her without your supervisor present." "I understand." "And the police chief? He's speaking with the detective now." Of course he was, already shaping the narrative, already closing doors. I hung up and looked back at the command tent. The mission continued without me, voices low and focused. For years I had led soldiers through uncertainty, through danger, through decisions that changed lives. Now the battlefield was different, quieter, more civilized on the surface, but the stakes felt sharper. The transport helicopter arrived 30 minutes later, blades slicing through the night. As I climbed aboard, Ruiz jogged over, breath visible in the cold air. "We confirmed the convoy, ma'am. Intelligence transmitted. Mission successful." I nodded. "Good work, Captain." He hesitated. "Your daughter? She'll be okay." I didn't answer. Instead, I strapped in and watched the desert recede beneath us. The base lights shrank into scattered points, then vanished entirely. The aircraft tilted toward the dark horizon, carrying me away from one mission and into another. Halfway through the flight, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. 3 words. It was an accident. No signature, no explanation, just that. I stared at the screen, then deleted the message. Accidents didn't send anonymous texts. Accidents didn't involve police chiefs and silent detectives. Accidents didn't make an 8-year-old whisper in fear. As the helicopter crossed the border and the first hint of dawn touched the sky, I felt something settle inside me. Not rage, not panic, but a quiet, controlled resolve. The kind that came before decisive action. They thought they understood the situation. They thought they could close ranks, label it a fall, and move on. They thought I was just a divorced mother flying home to accept what I was told. They had no idea who they had just crossed. The nurse's words echoed in my mind as the aircraft climbed toward the transport plane waiting to take me across the ocean. Her brother is the police chief. I fastened my harness tighter and looked forward, already planning the next move. By the time the sun rose over their quiet suburban street, I would be there. And when I arrived, the rules would change. The transport plane hummed with a steady vibration that settled into my bones, the kind that made time stretch and compress at once. I sat strapped into a narrow seat, a dim overhead light casting long shadows across the cargo bay. Around me, 2 enlisted crew members spoke quietly over paperwork, their voices blending with the drone of engines. I tried to close my eyes, but every time I did, Lily's face appeared pale, frightened, asking me not to let someone come back. I replayed the last conversation I had with her. It was 3 days before the incident. I had been sitting in the same desert tent headset, crooked half-focused on a logistics report. Lily called on video, her hair messy, one sock missing. She always forgot the second sock. "Mom, do I have to go to Dad's this weekend?" she asked. "You usually do," I said gently. "Why?" She shrugged, but her eyes flicked off camera. "Just asking." "Did something happen?" "No, too quick, then softer. She gets mad when he's not home." I remember feeling a faint tightening in my chest. "Rachel." Lily nodded. "She says I make things hard." "What kind of things?" Another shrug. "Just things." I wanted to push further, but the radio beside me crackled with mission chatter. "We'll talk tonight, okay?" I told her. "I love you." "I love you too." She hesitated. "Come home soon." That hesitation haunted me now. The first time I met Rachel had been 2 years earlier, 3 months after Daniel asked for the divorce. We met at a small coffee shop near the courthouse neutral ground. Rachel wore a cream sweater and a careful smile. She spoke softly, complimented my service, told me she admired women in uniform. Everything about her felt measured, like she was performing kindness rather than feeling it. Lily had been coloring quietly beside me. Rachel leaned down. "You're so pretty," she said, brushing a strand of Lily's hair behind her ear. Lily leaned subtly away. It was small, almost invisible, but I noticed. Daniel laughed awkwardly. "She's shy." Rachel straightened. "I just want what's best for her," she said. "Stability, routine." "What does that mean?" I asked. "Well," she said, stirring her coffee, "kids with parents in the military sometimes struggle. Boarding schools can be helpful." It was the first red flag. Lily was 6. "I'm not sending my daughter away," I said calmly. Rachel smiled again, that same practiced expression. "Of course, just a thought." Daniel squeezed her hand under the table. I pretended not to see. The divorce itself had been clean on paper, complicated in reality. We shared custody, alternating weekends and holidays. Daniel kept the house. I kept Lily's primary residency. It wasn't ideal, but it worked, for a while at least. Then Rachel moved in. At first, Lily didn't say much. She returned from visits quiet, withdrawn. I attributed it to adjustment. Children often needed time. But then came small details. Lily stopped bringing her favorite stuffed fox to Daniel's house. She said Rachel didn't like clutter. She began asking if she could call me before bed, something she hadn't needed before. She started packing her own snacks just in case. I raised concerns with Daniel. He waved them off. "Rachel's just strict. She's good for structure." "Structure is fine," I replied. "Fear isn't." "She's not afraid," he insisted. But Lily's eyes told a different story. 6 months later, I attended Lily's school recital. Daniel and Rachel sat 2 rows ahead. When Lily stepped on stage, she searched the audience until she found me. Her shoulders relaxed instantly. Rachel noticed. I saw the flicker in her expression, something sharp, almost resentful. After the recital, Lily ran to me. "Did you see me?" "You were perfect," I said, lifting her. Rachel approached, smiling tightly. "She did well." "She always does," I replied. Rachel's eyes lingered on Lily, clinging to me. "She gets very attached." "She's 8," I said. Rachel laughed softly. "Of course." Daniel changed the subject, but the tension stayed. The plane jolted, slightly pulling me back to the present. I shifted in my seat, fingers curled around the armrest. The memory stream didn't stop. 3 weeks before deployment, Lily came home from Daniel's house with a bruise on her arm. She said she bumped into a table. It looked more like a grip mark. I photographed it anyway. Daniel called me paranoid. "Kids get bruises," he said. "Not shaped like fingers," I replied. "You're overreacting." Rachel took the phone then. "Major Carter, with respect, we're doing our best." Her tone was polite, but something underneath it felt cold. "I'm documenting this," I said. Do whatever you need, she answered calmly. That calm bothered me more than anger would have. The engines deepened as the aircraft began its long descent toward refueling. I rubbed my temples, exhaustion creeping in. I hadn't slept. My mind ran in circles, piecing together fragments: Lily's hesitation, the bruise, the whispered fear. None of it proved anything alone. Together it formed something darker. Another memory surfaced the last time I saw Rachel in person. It was the morning I deployed. Daniel had dropped Lily off early. Rachel stayed in the car. Lily hugged me tightly. "Don't go," she whispered. "I have to," I said softly, "but I'll call every day." She nodded, then glanced back at the car. Rachel watched through the windshield, expression unreadable. As Daniel turned to leave, Rachel rolled down the window. "We'll take good care of her," she said. I met her eyes. I expect nothing less. She smiled faintly. Of course. The memory ended with the image of Lily standing between us, small, silent, caught in a space she didn't choose. The crew chief walked past, checking straps. "We land in 40 minutes, ma'am." "Thank you," I replied. I looked down at my hands. They were steady, years of training. But inside something burned, slowly controlled. Not rage, not yet. Just a growing certainty that the pieces were aligning into something deliberate. My phone buzzed again, a message from the nurse. "She's stable, still critical." I exhaled slowly. Then another message arrived from Daniel. It was an accident. Rachel tried to help her. "Please don't make this worse." I stared at the words. The same phrase again. Accident. As if repeating it enough would make it true. I typed a reply, then erased it. There was nothing to say yet. Words would come later, after facts. Outside the small window, the horizon glowed faintly with approaching dawn. Somewhere beyond that light was a quiet suburban street, a house where my daughter had been hurt and people already closing ranks. I leaned back, letting the engine noise fill the silence. The next phase would begin soon, and once it did, everything would change. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and overbrewed coffee, the same everywhere, whether you were in a military facility overseas or a quiet town in America. I walked through the sliding doors, still wearing my field jacket boots, dusty from travel exhaustion, sitting behind my eyes. The receptionist looked up, startled for half a second, before professional calm returned. "I'm here for Lily Carter," I said. Her fingers paused above the keyboard. "ICU, second floor." The elevator ride felt longer than the entire flight home. I watched the numbers change, each one tightening something in my chest. When the doors opened, the hallway was quiet, fluorescent lights humming softly. A nurse stood near the desk. She recognized me instantly. "Major Carter." "Yes." Relief washed across her face. "She's stable for now, but she's still in critical condition." I nodded. "Where is she?" The nurse led me down the corridor. "Your ex-husband is inside, and his wife." I stopped walking. "I want to see her alone first." She hesitated. "They've been insisting." I said alone. Something in my tone made her nod immediately. She stepped ahead, gently knocking before opening the door. Daniel stood beside the bed. His hair looked disheveled, shirt, wrinkled eyes red. Rachel sat in the chair near the window, hands folded in her lap. Both turned as I entered. For a moment, no one spoke. Lily looked impossibly small against the white sheets. Tubes ran from her arms, a monitor pulsed steadily beside her. A bruise darkened her cheekbone. Another shadowed her collarbone. My breathing slowed, deliberately controlled, measured the same way I stabilized myself before stepping into uncertain territory. Daniel stepped forward. "Emily." Out. My voice was quiet. He blinked. "What?" "I want to see her alone." Rachel rose slowly. "We've been here all night. She needs—" I said out. Daniel placed a hand on Rachel's arm. "Let's give her a minute." He looked at me, something defensive in his eyes. "We'll be right outside." They left, the door closing softly behind them. The room fell silent except for the steady rhythm of the monitor. I moved to the bedside and took Lily's hand carefully. It felt warm, fragile. "Hey, sweetheart," I whispered. Her eyelids fluttered. For a moment, nothing happened. Then her lips moved slightly. "Mom." "I'm here." Her fingers tightened weakly. "She got mad." I leaned closer. "Who?" Lily swallowed. "Rachel." The name landed like a weight. What happened? She said, I make things hard. She pushed me. I fell. Her voice faded, slipping back into sedation. I stayed still, memorizing every word. The monitor continued its steady beep. I brushed her hair gently away from her forehead. I'm here, I whispered again. When I stepped outside, Daniel stood immediately. Rachel remained seated, expression composed, almost rehearsed. She said you pushed her, I said. Rachel's eyebrows lifted in surprise. She's confused. She was dizzy. Daniel exhaled sharply. Emily, she fell down the stairs. Rachel tried to catch her. I watched them both. That's not what she said. Rachel's voice softened. She's scared. Kids misinterpret things. Before I could respond, a man in a gray suit approached from the hallway. Badge clipped to his belt. He extended a hand. Detective Harris. I ignored the hand. Have you taken her statement? She's sedated. We'll talk later. She already spoke. He shrugged. Kids say a lot when they're scared. She said she was pushed. His expression didn't change. There's no evidence of that. I studied him. Calm, dismissive, already decided. What about the bruising pattern, I asked. Consistent with a fall. Did you check the stairs? Yes. Any witnesses? He hesitated. No reliable ones. The nurse who'd called me shifted slightly behind the desk. I noticed the movement. Harris noticed it too. This appears to be a household accident, he concluded. I stepped closer. You reached that conclusion in under 2 hours. We see these cases all the time. Rachel folded her hands. This is getting out of hand. Daniel rubbed his face. Emily, please, let's not turn this into something it's not. The hallway felt suddenly smaller. My instincts sharpened the same sensation I felt when intelligence didn't align with reality. Something was off. Too quick. Too tidy. Is there security footage? I asked. Harris shook his head. Camera system malfunctioned. Convenient. What about neighbors? No one saw anything. The nurse behind the desk cleared her throat quietly. Harris glanced at her, then back at me. This is closed unless new evidence appears. Closed already. Rachel stepped forward slightly. Emily, I know this is hard, but we all want what's best for Lily. I looked at her hands, perfectly steady. You pushed her, I said quietly. Rachel's eyes widened. That's absurd. Daniel's voice rose. Enough. I turned away from them and walked toward the window at the end of the hall. Outside, early morning light touched the parking lot. Ordinary cars, ordinary lives. Inside, something far from ordinary was unfolding and being buried. Footsteps approached behind me. The nurse who'd called me spoke softly. She told me the same thing. I didn't turn when, right before sedation, she said, "Don't let her come back." My jaw tightened. Did you tell him I gestured toward Harris? Yes, the nurse hesitated. He said she was confused. Of course he did. Anyone else hear it? The respiratory tech. Document it. She nodded. It's in her chart. Good, that mattered. I walked back toward the hallway. Rachel and Daniel had moved closer together. Harris checked his watch. This isn't over, I said. Harris met my eyes calmly. From our standpoint, it is. Rachel gave a small, sympathetic smile. Emily, you're exhausted. Maybe you should rest. I held her gaze. If she dies, I will destroy you. The words came out flat, controlled. No shouting, no drama, just certainty. Rachel's smile faltered for half a second. Daniel stepped between us. You're not thinking clearly. Maybe not. But clarity wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was quiet, like the moment before a decision. I turned away and pulled out my phone. There was one call I hadn't made yet. Not to a lawyer, not to local authorities. Those channels were already compromised. I dialed a number from memory. It rang twice. Colonel Hayes. This is Major Carter. A pause. Emily, you're stateside. My daughter's in ICU, suspected assault. Local police won't act. His tone sharpened instantly. Explain. I watched Rachel and Daniel through the glass. The suspect's brother is the police chief. Another pause, then quietly understood. I need help. You have it. I ended the call and slipped the phone into my pocket. Across the hallway, Rachel whispered something to Daniel. Harris began walking away, case already filed in his mind. They thought the situation was contained. They thought silence meant control. They were wrong. Colonel Hayes didn't ask unnecessary questions. That was one of the reasons I called him instead of anyone else. He understood escalation, understood jurisdiction, understood how quickly a situation could shift when local authority was compromised. 10 minutes after our call, my phone vibrated again. I stepped into the stairwell before answering. "I've looped in CID and JAG," he said without preamble. "Before we move forward, I need clarity. Is your daughter a military dependent under your orders?" "Yes, she's listed in my file." "And you're currently deployed under federal authority?" "Yes." He exhaled quietly. "Then this crosses into federal jurisdiction if foul play is suspected." "That's what I thought." "What evidence do you have?" "Verbal statement from the victim before sedation. Nurse and respiratory tech heard it. Bruising inconsistent with fall. Local detective closed case within 2 hours. Suspect's brother is the police chief." Silence on the line, not doubt calculation. "Send me everything he said." "I will." "And Emily?" "Yes." "If this moves the way I think it will, it won't be quiet." "I'm not looking for quiet." "I didn't think you were." The call ended. I remained in the stairwell for a moment, letting the echo of his words settle. It won't be quiet. Good. Quiet had already been weaponized against my daughter. When I returned to the hallway, Daniel was on his phone. Rachel stood near the vending machine, scrolling through messages. She looked up when she saw me. For the first time, there was a flicker of uncertainty in her expression. "You called someone," she said. "Yes." "Who?" "Someone who listens." Her lips pressed together. "This is getting excessive." I didn't respond. Instead, I walked past her toward the nurse's station. "I need copies of her chart," I told the nurse. She hesitated. "Normally I'm her legal guardian." That wasn't entirely accurate. Daniel shared custody, but urgency overrode formality. The nurse nodded and began printing. Behind me, Rachel's voice sharpened slightly. "Daniel, she's escalating this." Daniel rubbed his forehead. "Emily, please, we can handle this privately." "Privately is what caused this," I replied. He opened his mouth, then closed it. The argument drained out of him, replaced by unease. While the printer hummed, my phone buzzed again. A text from Hayes. "CID reviewing, stand by." I slipped the phone away and took the documents. Every detail mattered: timestamps, notes, imaging orders. The nurse leaned closer as she handed them over. "She was terrified," she whispered. "Not confused, terrified." "I know," I said. I stepped back toward the window, flipping through the pages. Bruise measurements, blood pressure fluctuations, sedation dosage, everything clinical detached. Yet between the lines, a story formed, one that didn't match a simple fall. Rachel approached slowly. "You're making this bigger than it is." I didn't look up. "Did you push her?" Her voice softened, almost pleading. "No, I tried to grab her. She slipped." "You were alone with her?" "Yes." "Where was Daniel?" "At work." "So no witnesses." "She fell," Rachel repeated. I closed the file. "We'll see." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "You think you can intimidate me because you're in the military?" I met her gaze. "No, I think truth intimidates you." Daniel stepped between us again. "Stop, both of you." But Rachel didn't move. "You've always treated me like the enemy." "You made that easy." Her composure cracked for a fraction of a second. "She never accepted me." "She's 8. Rachel inhaled sharply. "She constantly compared me to you. Everything was, Mom does this, Mom says that." I studied her carefully. The resentment was real, raw. Beneath the polite veneer, something deeper simmered. "She's my daughter," I said. Rachel laughed quietly, humorless. "Exactly." The word hung in the air longer than it should have. I filed it away. Daniel looked confused. "Rachel?" She turned away, smoothing her hair, composure returning. "I'm tired, that's all." My phone vibrated again. I stepped aside to read the message. "CID requests photos of injuries, sending team liaison." Faster than expected. I glanced toward Rachel. She watched me carefully now, the confidence draining gradually. She didn't know what CID was. She didn't know what jurisdiction meant once federal authority stepped in. She only sensed the shift. Daniel noticed too. "What's going on?" "Nothing yet," I said. "Emily." "Just wait." He looked between me and Rachel, unease growing. The elevator doors opened at the end of the hall. A man in civilian clothes stepped out, posture straight eyes scanning. He walked toward the desk, flashed a credential briefly. The nurse nodded and pointed toward me. He approached. Major Carter. Yes. Agent Collins, CID liaison. Rachel's breath caught audibly. Daniel stared. The detective Harris, who had been speaking with another officer down the hall, turned sharply. This is a local matter, Harris said, approaching quickly. Collins remained calm. We're reviewing potential federal implications. There are none, Harris replied. Collins smiled faintly. We'll determine that. Rachel stepped back, color draining from her face. Daniel? He didn't answer. Collins turned to me. We'd like to photograph the injuries and review statements. Of course. Harris stiffened. You don't have jurisdiction. Not yet, Collins agreed, but we're assessing. That word assessing shifted everything. Harris knew it. Rachel sensed it. Daniel simply looked lost. As Collins followed the nurse into Lily's room, Rachel whispered, What did you do? I looked at her calmly. I asked for help. You're turning this into a federal case. You turned it into one. Her composure finally cracked. This is insane. No, I said quietly. What happened to my daughter is insane. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. Emily, if this goes public, I don't care. Rachel shook her head. You're overreacting. I met her eyes again. You still don't understand. She frowned. Understand what? I leaned slightly closer, my voice low controlled. You think this is a custody argument, a family disagreement, a divorced mother being dramatic. Her silence stretched. It's not, I continued. You hurt a military dependent while her parent was deployed, and you tried to bury it. Rachel swallowed. And now I said people who don't answer to your brother are involved. For the first time, real fear appeared in her eyes. They still didn't know who I was, not fully, not yet. But they were starting to understand that the ground beneath them was shifting slowly, irreversibly. And by morning it would collapse entirely. Morning arrived quietly, the way it always does in hospitals, filtered through narrow windows, softened by fluorescent lights that never fully turn off. I hadn't slept. I sat beside Lily's bed, listening to the steady rhythm of the monitor, watching her chest rise and fall. The bruising looked darker in daylight. Real, undeniable. Every mark felt like a sentence written across my patience. Agent Collins had finished documenting the injuries an hour earlier. He worked methodically, speaking little, photographing from multiple angles. Rachel had stood in the hallway, arms wrapped tightly around herself, watching like someone witnessing a slow unraveling. Daniel paced. Detective Harris lingered nearby, his posture rigid, his confidence thinning with every click of the camera. When Collins stepped out, he nodded to me. We've transmitted the images. Preliminary review underway. How long, I asked. Not long. He meant it. The hallway felt heavier now, as if everyone sensed the invisible shift. Harris tried to reassert control, speaking quietly into his radio. Rachel whispered urgently to Daniel. Neither approached me. They watched instead, uncertain, waiting. At 8:12 a.m., the elevator doors opened again. This time, 3 people stepped out. 2 in dark suits, 1 in uniform, not local police, military police. Their presence changed the air instantly. Conversation stopped. Even the nurses behind the desk straightened unconsciously. Agent Collins walked forward to meet them. Quick handshakes, low voices, professional efficiency. Then all 3 turned toward me. Major Carter, the woman in the suit said. I'm Special Agent Monroe, CID. This is Captain Adler, JAG Corps, and Sergeant Whitman, Military Police. Rachel's breath caught audibly. Daniel stared openly. Harris stepped forward. This is unnecessary, he said. We already determined. Monroe cut him off politely. We're conducting a federal review. There's no federal jurisdiction, Harris insisted. Captain Adler spoke calmly. There may be. We're evaluating whether a military dependent was intentionally harmed while the service member parent was deployed. Harris opened his mouth, then closed it. Rachel looked at Daniel. What does that mean? He didn't answer. Monroe turned to me. We'd like to speak privately. We stepped into the small consultation room. The door closed behind us. Based on preliminary evidence, Monroe said we're treating this as suspected assault. Captain Adler added, if confirmed federal charges apply. Obstruction by local authorities would also be reviewed. I nodded once. No surprise, just confirmation. Do you believe the local police interfered? Monroe asked. Yes. Why? Case closed in under 2 hours. Witness ignored. Victim statement dismissed. Suspect related to police chief. Adler exchanged a glance with Monroe. Understood. Next steps, I asked. We secure the scene, Monroe replied. Retrieve digital evidence. Re-interview witnesses. If probable cause emerges, we detain. The word detain hung quietly in the room. I thought of Rachel's steady hands, her calm voice, her resentment barely hidden. I thought of Lily whispering, she got mad. Yes, I said, do it. When we stepped back into the hallway, the shift was immediate. Sergeant Whitman positioned himself near the exit. Monroe approached Harris. We need access to the residence, she said. Harris stiffened. You'll need a warrant. Captain Adler handed him a document, already coordinated. Harris stared at it, his confidence finally cracked. Rachel's voice trembled. Daniel, what's happening? He shook his head. I don't know. Monroe turned toward them. We'll be visiting your residence shortly. Rachel stepped back. Why? To review the location of the incident. It was an accident, she insisted. We'll determine that. Her composure began to unravel. This is ridiculous. Daniel tried to steady her. Just cooperate. She pulled her arm away. You said this wouldn't... She stopped herself. I watched silently. No need to speak. The process was moving. An hour later, they left for the house. I remained at the hospital. Lily stirred once, whispering something incoherent. I held her hand, grounding myself in the present. Whatever happened next, this was why I was here. At 10:03 a.m., my phone buzzed. Entering residence now? I imagined the house, narrow staircase, polished wood railing, the place Lily had described months earlier. I pictured Rachel moving through those rooms, confident, believing everything was under control. That belief was dissolving now. Another message followed 15 minutes later. Camera system located, hard drive removed. Removed, not malfunctioned. My jaw tightened. Then, checking cloud backups. The waiting stretched. Each minute felt deliberate. Outside the window, morning traffic moved normally. People walked dogs, carried coffee, lived ordinary lives. Inside, the quiet pressure built. Daniel returned first. He looked pale, disoriented. He avoided my eyes. Rachel wasn't with him. Where is she? I asked. They asked her to stay, he said quietly. For questioning. He nodded. What did they find? He swallowed. I don't know, they wouldn't say. We sat in silence. Daniel stared at the floor. For the first time, doubt replaced defensiveness. At 10:47 a.m., my phone vibrated again. Backup recovered, reviewing footage. I closed my eyes briefly. The moment had arrived. Daniel watched me. You know something. Not yet. He leaned forward, voice breaking. Emily, if she did this. I didn't answer. The words didn't need repeating. 5 minutes later, another message appeared. This one longer. Footage shows altercation. Female adult behind child at top of stairs. Pushing motion observed. The hallway seemed to narrow around me. Daniel saw my expression. What? I looked at him steadily. They have video. His face drained of color. What does it show? I didn't soften it. She pushed her. Daniel leaned back, stunned. His hands trembled. No, she said. She lied. The silence that followed felt absolute. Minutes later, the elevator opened again. Monroe stepped out, Rachel walking beside her, pale eyes unfocused. Sergeant Whitman followed. Harris stood frozen near the desk. Rachel saw me. Something broke in her expression, anger, fear, desperation. It wasn't like that, she said. No one answered. Monroe spoke calmly. Rachel Reynolds, we need you to come with us. Rachel's voice rose. I didn't mean... Her words stopped. She looked at Daniel. Tell them. He couldn't. The ground beneath her had finally collapsed. Rachel's voice didn't collapse all at once. It unraveled slowly like something stretched too tight, finally giving way thread by thread. It wasn't like that, she repeated quieter this time, as if lowering her volume might change what the footage showed. Monroe stood beside her, composed professional, while Sergeant Whitman remained near the elevator, an immovable presence. Daniel looked between us, confusion and dread battling across his face. Rachel, what did you do? I didn't. She stopped, swallowed, then tried again. She slipped. I reached for her. Monroe spoke evenly. The footage shows you pushing her. Rachel shook her head violently. No, that's not, she moved. You were behind her, Monroe continued. Your hands were on her shoulders. Rachel's breathing grew shallow. Her composure, once so carefully maintained, was gone. The calm smile, the controlled tone, all of it replaced by something raw and desperate. She looked at Daniel again, searching for support. Tell them, she whispered. Tell them I would never. Daniel didn't move. He looked as though someone had drained him of structure. You told me she fell, he said quietly. She did. I didn't. Rachel pressed her hands to her temples. She kept arguing. She wouldn't listen. She said she wanted her mom. She said she stopped abruptly, realizing she had said too much. The hallway had gone silent. Even the nurses had stopped moving. Monroe exchanged a glance with Captain Adler. We're going to continue this conversation downstairs. Rachel stepped back. Am I being arrested? You're being detained pending investigation. Her eyes widened. You can't, my brother. Monroe's tone remained neutral. Your brother isn't involved in this process. Rachel's lips trembled. For the first time, the safety net she'd relied on vanished completely. Daniel sank into a chair. Rachel, why? She turned toward him, anger flashing through fear. She wouldn't stop comparing me to her, every day. Mom does this, Mom says that. She made me look like nothing. Her voice cracked. I just wanted her to listen. The words hung in the air like a confession half-formed. You pushed her, Daniel said, disbelief hollowing his voice. I didn't mean to push her that hard, Rachel blurted, then froze. Monroe stepped forward slightly. Thank you. We'll continue downstairs. Rachel stared at her, realizing what she'd just said. Her shoulders sagged. I didn't mean to. Sergeant Whitman guided her gently toward the elevator. She didn't resist. Daniel remained seated, staring at the floor. The doors closed, and she was gone. The silence afterward felt heavier than the confrontation itself. Daniel covered his face. I didn't know. I believed him. That was the tragedy. He had ignored the warning signs, dismissed the discomfort, trusted convenience over instinct. Now he sat in the aftermath, watching the consequences unfold. You told me she was strict, I said quietly. I thought she was, his voice broke. I didn't think this. I didn't answer. There was nothing left to argue. Detective Harris approached slowly, his earlier certainty gone. I wasn't aware of the footage, he said. You didn't look, I replied. He exhaled. We were told the system malfunctioned. By her, I asked. He nodded. Captain Adler stepped forward. We'll need your original report. Harris stiffened. Of course. And any communication with the police chief. Harris hesitated. He only asked for updates. Provide them, Adler said calmly. Harris nodded, but unease settled across his expression. The focus had shifted. The investigation no longer centered solely on Rachel. It widened, examining how quickly the case had been closed, who influenced that decision, what had been ignored. My phone vibrated, a message from Monroe. Interview in progress, statement recorded. I leaned back against the wall, letting the tension ease slightly. Not relief, not yet, but movement. The truth was no longer fragile. It had structure now, evidence, admissions. Daniel remained seated. After a long moment, he spoke. Will she go to jail? Yes. He nodded slowly. I deserve that. This isn't about you. I know. He looked toward Lily's room. Is she going to be okay? I don't know yet. He swallowed. If she wakes up, tell her I'm sorry. I studied him. For the first time, he looked like someone stripped of certainty, forced to face the consequences of inaction. There was no anger left in me for him, only distance. The elevator opened again 20 minutes later. Monroe returned, expression composed but firm. She's admitted to pushing her, she said quietly. Claims she lost control during an argument. Daniel closed his eyes. She also stated she removed the camera hard drive afterward, Monroe continued. She intended to discard it. That explained the missing footage. Charges, I asked. Assault of a minor, potential attempted homicide depending on medical review, obstruction for tampering with evidence. The words felt clinical final. And her brother, I asked. We're reviewing his involvement. He contacted Detective Harris before the case was closed. We'll determine whether that influenced procedure." Harris shifted uncomfortably. Monroe looked at me. "Your daughter's statement will be critical once she wakes." "She will," I said. Monroe nodded. "We'll post an officer outside her room." For the first time since the call in the desert, I felt something inside me loosen, not peace but direction. The chaos had resolved into process. The truth, once fragile, now moved through channels stronger than influence. Daniel stood slowly. "Can I see her?" "Yes," I said. We walked into the room together. Lily slept quietly, machines steady, fragile but alive. Daniel approached cautiously as if afraid he didn't deserve the space. "I'm here, kiddo," he whispered. I remained near the foot of the bed, watching. Outside the window, midday light filled the sky. The world moved forward, indifferent to the storm that had passed through this hallway. But inside, something irreversible had happened. Rachel's power had collapsed. The silence had broken. And the truth finally had a voice. Part 6. The moment everything broke. 1041 words. Tieptuk. Part 7. The morning after justice. The first sign that Lily was waking came in the smallest movement, her fingers tightening faintly around mine. It was just after sunrise the next morning, the hospital quieter than usual, the air carrying that strange stillness that comes after something irreversible has already happened. I hadn't left her side. Daniel had gone home hours earlier, exhausted and hollow, promising to return later. A military police officer sat outside the door, a silent reminder that the situation had moved far beyond a family dispute. Her eyelids fluttered once, then again. Lily, I leaned closer. Her lips parted. "Mom, I'm here." Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused at first, then settling on me. Relief spread across her face, small, fragile, but unmistakable. "You came." "I told you I would." She swallowed, wincing slightly. "Is she here?" "No," I said softly. "She can't hurt you anymore." Lily nodded, weakly, tension easing from her shoulders. "She got mad," she whispered. "I said I wanted to call you. She said I was ruining everything." My throat tightened, but I kept my voice steady. "You don't have to think about that now. Just rest." Her eyes drifted closed again, but her hand remained wrapped around mine. The monitor continued its steady rhythm. For the first time since the desert call, I allowed myself to breathe fully. A soft knock sounded. Monroe stepped inside quietly. "She's awake." "Yes." "Good." Monroe's tone softened slightly. "Her statement will help confirm the charges." "She'll tell the truth," I said. "I know." Monroe paused. "Rachel's been formally charged. Assault of a minor, aggravated bodily harm, and evidence tampering. Bail denied pending hearing." I nodded. No satisfaction, just acknowledgement. "And the police chief?" I asked. "Under investigation for interference. Internal affairs and federal review both involved." The system had begun correcting itself. Daniel arrived an hour later. He stepped into the room cautiously, as if afraid he might disrupt something fragile. Lily saw him and gave a faint smile. "Hi, Dad." He swallowed hard. "Hi, sweetheart." He approached slowly. "I'm so sorry." She studied him, then nodded. "It's okay." It wasn't not really, but children often offered forgiveness before adults earned it. Daniel wiped his eyes quickly and sat beside her. "I should have listened," he whispered. Lily squeezed his hand weakly. "You're here now?" I watched them quietly. Whatever came next, Lily would need stability, not more conflict. The anger that once filled the space between Daniel and me had burned away, leaving only shared responsibility. Later that afternoon, the doctor entered with updated results. "She's responding well, no permanent damage expected. We'll keep her for observation, but she should recover fully." The words settled over me like sunlight breaking through cloud. Fully. That was all that mattered. When the doctor left, Lily shifted slightly. "Mom." "Yes." "Did the army come?" I hesitated, then smiled faintly. "They helped make sure the truth came out." Her eyes brightened. "For me?" "For you." She seemed satisfied with that. "Cool." Daniel let out a quiet laugh, half relief, half disbelief. The tension in the room softened. By evening, the hallway outside had returned to normal rhythm. Nurses moved between rooms. Carts rattled softly, distant announcements echoed overhead. Yet something fundamental had changed. The fear that had hovered over the last 24 hours had dissolved, replaced by clarity. Rachel's actions were no longer whispers in a hallway. They were documented, recorded, undeniable. Her brother's influence no longer shielded her. The silence had broken, and once broken, it couldn't be restored. Before sunset, Monroe returned once more. "She'll be transferred to recovery tomorrow. After that, you can take her home." "Thank you," I said. "You did the hard part," Monroe replied. "You refused to let it disappear." I thought back to the desert the moment the call came, the sand against my boots, the quiet resolve forming. It felt distant now, yet connected like the first step in a path that had led here. After Monroe left, Lily drifted into sleep again. Daniel stood. "I'll give you two some time." He paused at the door. "Emily, thank you." I nodded once, no more words needed. The room dimmed as evening settled. I adjusted Lily's blanket, brushing her hair gently from her forehead. Her breathing remained steady. Safe. Outside, the sky darkened slowly. Inside, the machines hummed constant and reassuring. I leaned back in the chair, exhaustion finally catching up, but it was a different kind now, not fear-driven, just the natural weight after a long fight. Lily stirred once more. "Mom, I'm here." "Don't go." "I won't." She relaxed again, trust returning fully. I watched her for a long moment, then looked out the window. The city lights flickered on one by one. Somewhere beyond them, life continued: quiet streets, ordinary homes, families unaware of the storm that had passed here. And that was how it should be. Justice didn't need to be loud. Sometimes it simply meant restoring what should never have been taken. If you've ever stood in a moment where the truth felt buried, where power seemed stronger than fairness, you know how easy it is to stay silent. But silence is what lets harm grow. Speaking up, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it feels impossible, is what changes everything. If this story moved you, I'd like to hear your thoughts. Have you ever faced a moment where you had to stand up for someone you love? Tell me in the comments below and share where you're watching from. We read every message, and your voice helps keep stories like this alive. There are many more journeys like this ahead, so consider subscribing so you don't miss the next one. Let's keep walking this path together.